Success VMware Cloud Team APJ office hours. I'm joined today by Z House, VM A to Z on Twitter. I'm again Matt Vandenbeld at vCloudMatt. We also have a couple of our CSMs, our customer success managers from the APJ region. Maybe I'll give them a chance to say hi. Dave, did you want to say hi? Give a little brief introduction to about yourself.
Sure. I've recently joined VMware in the customer success management role, based in Sydney. So I'll be working with our strategic and named accounts in the ANZ region, primarily in the northern part of Australia.
Excellent. I don't know if AJ wants to talk or not, but he's also. Oh, he's going to come in.
I certainly can talk. How's things with you, Matt?
Good. Sure. Do you want to give us a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. So I think like Dave mentioned, so I'm another CSM in ANZ. So Dave and I are working together. So Dave looks after the northern ANZ region accounts, and I look after the southern ANZ. That's all about me.
Perfect. So there are some of the new guys we have around. As you and I have been around what seems like forever, uh, in an enjoyable way. There's some days are a little more challenging, but that's the beauty of having a brand new product and going through some stuff. So we were just discussing before we went live here that we'd really like to really extend this out and make sure that everybody kind of out there knows. Our CSMs are going to be forwarding this invite out to some of their customers. This is, accessible by everybody. This is a completely open format. That's why we do it on Twitch. That's why we have a Zoom invite as well. This is open to like anybody that wants to come ask questions of us, wants us to demo things. We did get some suggestions that I'm working on. This is kind of one of the suggestions. It was really nice of Z to kind of jump in last minute. This is something he was just kind of playing around with, and I managed to rope him into doing it live. Nothing like doing it live, which I do truly appreciate. Another one we're going to be doing here in the near future is a suggestion and an ask was to see if we can know how CloudFront from AWS can integrate with the VMC, and that's something that could definitely be done. But Z, do you want to maybe give a little overview of what you're playing around with here?
Yeah, definitely. So one of my customers was trying to get ALB/ELB set up and was having some difficulties. So I've, as Matt said, I was just kind of working on this and had put it out to our team and said if anybody wanted to watch, and then I got roped into this. So now I'm kind of doing it live, although I've gone through and I actually got it working. I don't know if somebody may have seen that right as we went live or not, but yeah. So it's I guess the use case is so I guess I'll back up here. And this is live. It's been quite the day, so I'll apologize for that.
And just again to make clear, I literally roped him in last second to do this, so it's on me.
No worries. So it is a use case, and it's definitely one that we're seeing more of. And the reason for that is that the so if you're familiar with NSX in the on-prem world, obviously the ESG has the capability of doing load balancing. In VMC, we do not have that functionality exposed yet. It is on the roadmap. So the way that can be done now or today is a couple of ways. And ALB/ELB is one of those ways with our obvious partner AWS, and then it goes across the cross account ENI. So we're not having to do some NAT rules inside of the SDDC. It's all quote unquote local traffic inside of the region and availability zones inside of Amazon. So it's definitely something that is appealing right now, not only for the fact that we don't have it, but maybe you're already using ALB/ELB today.
Just to add a slight clarification onto that. So this is a paid for service by AWS. So this is something that is not inherently
Correct.
free. This is something that you have to subscribe to from their end. And there's a lot of features that go along with their ELBs and ALBs that can bring more global load balancing presence to the product. But where Z was talking about that free traffic is once it hits that load balancer, all the traffic that goes from there to VMC is not charged. But then egressing again back out to the internet would be, and that's by AWS.
Good catch. So definitely. So I'm a big subscriber and proponent of there's no such thing as a free lunch. That definitely applies in I won't even just say the cloud world. I think that definitely applies in our world today. So Yes, you're absolutely correct. So the ALB ELB costs, I am not sure what that is, but that would be in your what we call the linked account or the customer owned AWS account. So you would see whatever charges those charges those may be, whether it's egress or just the ALB ELB. I'm not sure if there's just a static per hour rate on that or not.
Yeah, one of the kind of the horrible things from our latest reorg is I can't use the excuse I'm not in sales anymore. Our job is not to sell, but we do kind of fall under that organization now, so we should probably ramp up a little bit on pricing because that's I'm with you. I don't know really how much anything costs. And,
It's I mean, we could at the end of the day, we could Google it.
true enough. I know how much our hosts cost. That part I know.
There you go. So right here, Elastic Load Balancer. That's a Sumo Logic page. It's quarter of a cent. Anyway, I mean, it's all well documented. So it's but no, very good point that it is not free. There's very little in the world that is free today. So with that, we can kind of jump into it. So as I said, the customer use case was 2 VMs running in VMC. I think they were actually Windows VMs, but I was having some difficulty getting my template to clone. So I just happened to use Photon, a couple of Photon VMs running HTTPD. We can see them here. They're on my segment. Kind of back up to give you guys a little bit of a larger overview here. So they're on this segment right here. I do have a VPN from my quote unquote on-prem, which is just my house, my home lab, to my SDDC. And then that's the only outbound or external connectivity to the SDDC. The other connectivity is from the SDDC over the XENI or the cross account ENI into my AWS account. So those VMs sit on this segment here. I do have an SSH session to both of those here from my house, which is via VPN connectivity.
And for those that aren't familiar with it, the Photon OS he's referring to is a very lightweight Linux distribution that's developed by VMware.
Correct. So, and another good point, we can kind of slip that in there. So, Photon 3.0 just came out. I think it was towards the beginning of the year. It was like a January or maybe early February time. I'm not a super Linux head, if you would say, or if that's a term. Sorry if I'm offending anybody. I dabble a little bit in it. SLES used to be my preferred, but Photon, as Matt said, it's I think the images, it's like 150 megs or so, pretty stripped down. So that's kind of my personal go-to if I need anything Linux based. But I think in that world, it's definitely whatever your flavor is. Most people tend to stick to it. I guess it's also worth noting on the Photon topic, a lot of our appliances are either based on Photon now or transitioning to that. So in the past, they were also based on SLES, which may or may not have been the reason that I was using that in the past. But yeah, so Virtual Center Appliance, NSX V Manager, I believe, has been transitioned to Photon. So there's that. So okay, so I've got my VMs that are running here. They're on the segment. They've got an IP address 101 and 102 respectively. I have changed the default VTI rule from drop to allow so that I can have my connectivity from my quote unquote on-prem, my home lab, into my SDDC. That's what's allowing me to SSH in and ping and everything else. I've got an internet bound rule because I needed to grab some packages. And these are obviously not the most secure things in the world. These are just any. So I've ultimately...
I was just going to suggest don't use this as a template for your firewall rules.
I have, I usually for demos, I try to make it a little more applicable. But as we said, this was kind of a last minute. So definitely the default VTI, I personally feel that, whether you have an on-prem firewall or in my case, my lab firewall or something vice versa, it really comes back to your security posture. And that's definitely a question that I've been seeing a lot is, how do we do this? Do we do the north-south or the gateway firewall and the distributed firewall? and security groups in Amazon and are on-prem? Do we just pick one or the other? And it really comes back to what your company's security policy is. You can definitely do them everywhere, all those 4 places that I mentioned. You can do something similar to what I've done here, and where I probably wouldn't do this internet rule. I would lock this down a little bit. But the VPC interface, so if you just did an any and VMC, and then you could control that in your security groups in your linked account. Same thing with the VTI rule, or if you're doing direct connect, instead of duplicating those firewall rules in VMC, you could manage them on-prem. But again, or you could manage them all in VMC and have any place else. I mean, really, the sky's the limit on the kind of the combination that you could do with this and the complexity. So back to our rules. So our VTI rule, and that's what's allowing me to connect from my on-prem over my route-based VPN. Internet rule, I can actually remove this because I don't need it anymore. I grabbed the packages that I needed. And then my VPC rule. So this is what's allowing my my VMs and VMC to communicate to my VPC. So I do have an instance over there that I can show, and I'll demonstrate that connectivity. Outside of that, I've created some basics so I can manage Virtual Center. This rule here, I was messing around with this. This one, I did actually have these configured in a slightly more lockdown way. So I have a user-defined group. It's just RFC 1918. You can call it on-prem, whatever the name is, however you want to identify it. So my management infrastructure is locked down. I just kind of opened up my compute gateway because I was just kind of monkeying around. No distributed firewall, anything like that. So while we're talking about what I have, and so this is my AWS account. I do have a single instance running that I've forgotten about for a while, so I'm going to get a little bit of a bill. Oops. So this is in my AWS account, and it just so happens to be in the same subnet where I deployed my SDDC. Not best practice, not recommended. It definitely works. The reason that it's not best practice or recommended from our standpoint is if you come to the network interfaces, you see everything here. So these are the cross-account ENIs that we've talked about, and actually I've talked about a number of times on these webinars. These translate to the hosts. So my environment is just a one node SDDC. So I only have one that's in use. You can see all the VMware ones right here. There's 17 of them that are created. And this ENI right here is what facilitates the connectivity between my AWS account and my SDDC. I'm going to show a little bit of that here. So if we look, 6 Foxtrot, 4 Echo, if we look at VPC and look at our route table, Foxtrot 4 Echo. So this right here is my management subnet. So if you've deployed your SDDC, or you've been on one of these webinars before, or you've seen maybe gone through a hands-on lab, this is the range that you supply when you deploy your SDDC. It's either a 23, a 20, or a 16. That's that range there. This is my segment that I created in VMC. And I guess while we're here, let's do this. And no DHCP. So I just created a new segment, and I guess we'll divulge a little bit from what I was going to talk about since we're here. A couple of things that'll happen. So if we come back over to my route table, give it a refresh. There's my new segment. It doesn't have the name, of course. That name is just a construct inside of NSX, and for a friendly name. So a couple of things happen. So now we have a route in our route table so that I can communicate from my AWS account into my SDDC and vice versa. Of course, according that the gateway firewall allows it and the security group in your AWS account allows it. The other thing that this has done has also is now advertising that route across my route-based VPN. So we had this discussion, I think, and Michael talked about this, coworker on our team earlier in the week, where we talked about VPNs and route-based VPNs. So, and actually I had a discussion with a customer this week as well. Why would I want to do route-based VPN over policy-based? This is a perfect example. So whether you're adding networks or moving networks, anything like that, if I had added this and I was doing policy-based VPN, I would have to come in here and I'm just assuming that I'm clicking edit versus adding, and I would have to add that new network here. And I would also have to make a change on my endpoint in my lab to map that network. You can do it, it works. At the end of the day, the functionality is the same, but if you're changing networks, modifying networks, anything like that, if you're doing policy-based, it really takes the dynamic aspect out of, not really, it totally takes any type of dynamic out of your environment. So with that, back to the question at hand, or I guess, do we have, let's see here, can look at chat. I don't know if we have any questions or anybody.
No questions so far.
No questions. All right.
So one thing you kind of breezed upon and is worth bringing up now, I guess, before you jump right into the LB stuff, is the security groups. So when Aiden did a presentation on this a couple months ago, so it's on our YouTube page. But when you're talking across ENI, as he talked about, there our gateway firewall, so that's allowing things on our end, but you also need to modify it on AWS's end.
Yep.
So that there's a concept of security group on their side as well that needs to be configured to allow this traffic to talk.
Yeah, that's perfect. I don't know if the recording or the presentation had started right when I found my missing link, so to say. So if we look at our security groups, sorry, hold on.
So yeah, security groups are your kind of AWS's firewall, for lack of a better term. They have both network ACLs and the security groups.
Yes. All right. Sorry about that.
Yep.
Totally interrupted by my dogs. Okay. So what we've got, where am I at? I'm in VPC.
It's right there.
Oh, sorry. I was going to show the load balancer here.
Oh, okay.
So what we have, actually, no, you're right. Look at the screen. So what I had done, and again, I don't know if it made the very first part of the video. So my security group is also very much like my my gateway firewall rules in VMC, because I just allowed everything. So let's do this. We'll tone it back a little bit. Let me get my IP here. Okay. So now only I can get to this guy. All right. Looks like it still works. Maybe only going to web 1. Anyway, so if we tone this back. Oh, actually, I also inadvertently broke this, because now I cannot get to the other side. So if we come over here, if we look at my instance, right, this guy, I can't get to this instance. I could before, because I had my zeros in there. So let's make a modification here. Let's do all traffic, add a rule. Actually, you know what? We'll do this. Work. What's it? 216. So we're allowing ICMP across. My load balancer is still not going to work because I'm obviously not allowing port 80. So let's come back over here. And if I think about this, it's always kind of boggles my mind a little bit because there's so many areas. So this is inbound. So we're allowing 80 from, if you hold up your left hand or your hand, not just your left hand, but your hands, thinking your SDDC is on your left side and your AWS account is on your right side. So you're inbound from left to right. That should work. Let's see if this works. No, what did I do? So this guy is working. Outbound is fine. I'm not connected from VPN. Let's see, let's change this guy. The same thing. All right. Wow.
This is a slight preview of next week's webinar of troubleshooting. So we're going to take the easy way. Just for the purposes of demo.
We'll go back to, okay. Yeah, okay, so this is, and the, yeah, it's, I have to think about this and figure out why inbound traffic, and it likely has to do with, so we're actually going from the ELB and AWS across into the SDDC, so it's not, this outbound rule should take care of it. I'm not sure why this inbound is not. I think it has to do, since, I mean, we're inbound on 80, but the response port is going to be random. So I think we would have to add that random range. I forget there's a terminology for it. If we had Michael here, I'm sure he would know. So this is kind of it, right? It ended up working. If we look at the one piece that I haven't quite figured out is, so these still show unhealthy. We got a health check here. I guess we could add a simple, HTML. We're getting 200 on it. So, and this may have been the part where the customer I was working with was getting hung up on, because the health checks were never coming back as healthy. And I don't know. So in NSX and other load balancers, I know there's like a retest or like a status button. Oh, maybe I just found the retest / status button. So obviously working. It's just a simple web page. I think it had to do with, because it was just looking at / versus the the file. So I just have a simple file in there. Some of your health checks. This one's pretty basic, so it's just looking at the file, making sure we're getting a 200 back, so your application could still be down. Some of the stuff I've done in the past with like vRealize automation, where it's querying either your application in the background or Postgres, things like that. So I mean, it's not specific to ALB, ELB. It's just kind of load balancing in general. That if you're just doing a ping or an ICMP response, then that's pretty basic and may or may not work for what you're trying to load balance.
Did you maybe want to just kind of show what you put in there for the targets and how that
Yeah.
reference
So
would-
if we go to targets, if we edit, so it's actually, what we can do. Let's just do this. Let's go back. So the load balancer setup is pretty simple. So we're gonna delete this guy. Delete our target group. Listener or rule? Is it no? All right. So the work on the back end is still the same, right? I don't need to do anything with these VMs. It wouldn't take super long, but it would take probably longer than the 33 minutes that we have left. Our firewall rules are still in place, so maybe once we recreate these, we can go back and play with that a little bit to kind of lock them down. So load balancer, create. I haven't done enough research on this to be able to say the difference. I saw the HTTP, HTTPS, and that was what I was looking to do. Internet facing, so that's it gives you a public facing IP that that you can use. If you do an internal, it had a little bubble here, so you can actually specify the IP. If you do an internet facing, you cannot. It just comes out of the Amazon IP pool. We're just doing HTTP, but you can also do HTTPS if you were load balancing that. Select your VPC. So the one thing that I did not have when I went through this right before was I did not have an IGW. Actually, more probably, I had an IGW on these subnets, but I did not have a route for it. I'm not sure if it would have let me continue, but when I selected my AZs, it popped up and said there was no IGW attached. It took me a minute to realize that I had just deleted the route. So one of the things to kind of note, if so we have two tabs open here, I can show that. So just the default route pointing out. So anything that's not explicit is going to go out to IGW, aka the internet. And that was the one piece that I was missing. You can select your availability zones. You need at least 2 of them. If you only try to do one, it'll tell you that you need at least 2. They're going to, of course, warn you since I'm just load balancing port 80. You can either create a new security group or an existing one. I'm just using the existing one because I obviously have issues figuring that out. So the target group, there's 2 different pieces of it. So you have the load balancer itself and then the individual target groups. I'm creating a new one because I deleted that previous one. If I had left it, I could have just attached the target group to this load balancer, but we would have missed some of the, well, we would have missed this part of it specifically. We are not load balancing an instance inside of AWS, obviously. This is these are VMs in VMC. So you just do an IP. It'll ask you here. Specify my web page here. Select other IP address. It's obviously not, like I said, it's not coming from our VPC. the classic review page and then create. It'll take a little bit here. So here's the name that's associated to it. It does likely not exist yet. It's provisioned, it'll come up here.
So this is essentially spinning up some invisible resources on the AWS side.
Yeah, and what that looks like, I'm sure most people are familiar with either the load balancer in NSX or an F5 or Checkpoint or actually I don't know if Checkpoint does load balancers or NetScaler. I'm sure there's some type of logical or virtual construct that's being created in the back end. It does take a little while. I think it took about a minute or so the last time I did this.
Still faster than installing physical hardware in your data center.
It I would say it definitely is. Amazon Prime is fast, but I think just the delivery time on the physical hardware would probably make that a moot point.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good time as well. If anybody has any questions or anything, I mean, it's been pretty straightforward showing how this is done. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I could also mention I'm going to be at Dell Technology World in a couple weeks for anybody that's going out that way. I'll be in our Cloud City booth, so you can drop by and say hi if you so desire. And there we go, we're active.
Okay, so there it is. I'll just grab this guy here since we're using it. And between Web 1 and Web 2. So now I'm assuming if we come back and look at our target group, so yeah, so these show healthy. So I think this was, well, this was likely part of the reason that the customer I was working with, we could not get their health checks to come up, and they had similar to what I had. So it was just I think it was actually just a directory. It wasn't a file. So I was going to go and look at the Amazon documentation to, I'm assuming they have examples on what these health checks, what it's looking for. And then likely the other piece was the security group. So just not allowing either all traffic, and I'll have to play with that. I'm not sure why. I guess we could play with it now. Let's see here. So if we do, so that's coming across. So this here should mean this is broken. Yes. Head roll. Traffic. Where would this be coming from? So we can just add rules until it starts working again. Oh, I need to add an inbound for this guy. Wonder. Public ones here. Let's take a look. both of these. Over here. Not makes sense to me why these would have to be in here. One thing I find handy is that you can do this and then it will break it out into 2 rules. Nope. I think that's my VPC. Ah, that's what it was. I had no inbound from my VPC. Well, there you go. Doing it live. So what do we need here? So this is, we don't need this guy. We can clean this guy up here. This is where my VMs live in VMC. This is my public IP coming from my house. That's allowing me to hit the load balancer. And then I don't fully understand this. You'll have to chat with Michael tomorrow. I don't fully understand why we need an inbound rule from the VPC. But that was the other piece that we're missing. So that's good information. Now I can go back to my customer and verify that we have all of this. So I wonder if, how could we lock this down? So I bet we could lock this guy to just 80. Yep. So that's part of it. Yeah, the security group piece is a little confusing to me. I personally would probably leave these as any or alls, and control it either in the gateway firewall or the distributed firewall and VMC. That's just because of what I'm familiar with. I would assume that most people would probably tend to gravitate towards what they're familiar with as well. So if you're, you've been doing AWS and security groups for a long time, I would expect the reverse, right? So to have your any's in VMC or vice versa. And the true mind meld would be to get myself and you together, and we could totally lock it down between VMC and the AWS side. So if you're watching this video and you have any suggestions, would definitely be interested to see that. Always up for learning something. Firm believer also that you learn something new every day. So.
Well, I definitely learned some stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that was good. I think that was a good demo, and I think it highlighted, as long as you kind of got all the pieces in play, how easy it is to actually set this up and get kind of load balancing into VMC happening relatively on demand.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little, well, it's not a little, it's actually quite a lot embarrassing to say. So the longest part of this entire process was getting Photon into there. So my SDDC is a beta or an early access build, and I ran into a number of problems with it where I wasn't able to clone VMs from my on-prem environment. So I just fiddled around with it for way too long. I should have just imported the OVAs from the Photon download website and started from there. But I mean, I fiddled with this pretty much all day, off and on in between calls. So once that was up, on the Photon side of things, the IP tables is wide open. So I mean, this is from a functionality perspective, I think is valid, but from an applicable use case to somebody's real world environment, it is definitely not. So IP tables is ultimately turned off. Our firewall rules are pretty much, or not pretty much, they are wide open. But I think that it also depends on your posture or your security posture on how are you going to tackle this. Are you going to lock it down completely from the beginning and then try to figure out, is it your application that's not working, or is it a firewall that's blocking your application? Or you can, come in with maybe not wide open, but a minimal security posture and verify that your application's working, and then start dialing back the access to it. I think that's probably a pretty age old question. If anybody has a solution to that, I imagine they would be pretty wealthy this day and age.
Sure enough. Well, again, I appreciate you jumping on and showing us this. I haven't seen any questions, so I think we can probably call it a little bit earlier today, make it a little bit of a shorter video, a little bit easier to consume perhaps by those watching on YouTube. I do appreciate everybody coming out that watched on Twitch, that came out to our Zoom meetings. Again, everybody's welcome to join these meetings. We run these ones for the APJ hours, same time every week, Thursdays, 4 o'clock Pacific. I think it's 10 o'clock in Sydney, 10 a.m. We do run for Americas at 8 a.m. on Tuesdays, and EMEA is 10 a.m. GMT, I believe. Their time zone change is coming up, so I'm not exactly sure if that's going to modify a little bit, but it's 2 o'clock in the morning Pacific time anyway. So we do run these 3 times a week. More than welcome to drop in, ask any questions, send us an email at cloudcs@vmware.com, or tweet at me at vcloudmatt, or at z at vma to z if you want to see anything else, any suggestions, any comments about this video. And next week we're going to be doing a webinar, and we saw a little bit of a preview of it, perhaps, where we got Mohit from our CSE team, one of our engineers that works on support. We're going to go over some troubleshooting, and we're going to do that in the APJ time. So it's going to be starting an hour and a half from now, whatever that's going to be. And it's right now it's 4:45. It's going to start at 6:30 Pacific time on Tuesday next week. So for those in the APJ that want to see how we go over some troubleshooting stuff, we're going to cover some of the VPN, some firewall stuff, some direct connect stuff, some of the common stuff that we've seen customers kind of hit, and how to troubleshoot it, and solve some issues preferred by yourself. And you always leverage our support for sure, but we want to make sure that we enable everybody and give everybody the tools and knowledge to be able to do these things themselves. That's kind of the overall vision of this product, is for everybody to just be able to consume as ever they see fit. So again, I'd like to really express my gratitude to Z jumping in absolute last minute to go over some content here. Appreciate the CSMs from our APJ realm coming out and attending as well. And I look forward to talking to everybody next week. Thanks.